With me today is the beautiful Vanessa Bell, and Vanessa is an eco-entrepreneur, sustainability advocate, and champion of Australian merino wool. A former model turned eco-entrepreneur, Vanessa leads a luxury knitwear brand. As host of the Fashion to Farmer podcast, she spotlights the voices shaping a more sustainable future for fashion. So welcome, Vanessa.
Julie, thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be here with you today, and I'm truly grateful for this opportunity.
Oh, absolutely my pleasure. And I'm really keen to jump into your story. So I think the question on a lot of people's minds will be from the runway to a farm to eco entrepreneur. How does that happen?
I'm really conscious it's not the obvious career path. Look, Julie, for me, it's been actually very much a natural progression and evolution. I'll take you literally back to the age of 15. I was plucked off the streets of Sydney and was sort of came crashing into what is the fashion business as a model. My first job was actually for Harper's Bazaar Australia, and my second job was for Australian Vogue. And, I completed my education, and in that world of incredible creativity and colour and vibrancy, it was actually that very first shoot working for Australian Vogue that I came across wool and really seeing it in its true luxury form as I was modelling a Jean-Paul Gaultier jacket. So that is literally where it started. And then through seeing wool on the runway, my journey kind of evolved through different careers in media and finance. But then I crashed into my farmer, my beautiful Aussie farmer, Philip. We fell in love, and the journey then sort of steered me towards falling in love with wool just by the virtue of doing the washing up and looking out the window and seeing a mob of sheep walking past. We'd had a little boy, and I was looking for something to keep him warm. And so my mother at the time gifted me a family heirloom knitted by my great-grandmother, Sarah. And it was just so beautiful. So literally after 75 years, still going strong, felted by wear, but still luxurious, and had this gorgeous comfort to it. So that's how I fell in love with wool. But in terms of, getting to understand the fibre, it then dawned on me just the attributes of this incredible fibre that most people in the city knew nothing about. And certainly, as a city slicker myself, I had absolutely no knowledge of the fact that it was thermoregulating or antibacterial or, lint resistant, all the other beautiful qualities that go with wool. And I suppose, in my evolution of creating a handcrafted baby blanket business, and then through the power of connection, meeting my designer and really joining the dots of, yes, I wanted to return to my fashion roots. I suppose the eco aspect came in when firstly I understood the natural benefits of merino wool, but also understanding that merino wool could be part of the solution and not the problem. So it was kind of like this aha moment where I realized that I was actually not leaving fashion behind as a farmer. I was actually redefining it. I was actually coming to a space where I could educate consumers. I could be bridging the gap to understand myself what was possible with merino wool because I'd seen it, I'd worked with it. I was very fortunate to work with some of the best designers in the world, such as Giorgio Armani, Valentino, and seeing how they would use merino wool, and especially super fine Australian merino wool, and then to be in a situation where I was penning up my sheep and in the shed and seeing greasy wool and realizing that I actually had this complete understanding of how it could impact the environment. And I suppose when we look at the microplastics going into our oceans and landfill, I realized that I could actually be a voice. I could redefine the narrative of what it means to be a woman in ag. I could actually be that connector so that I could get the message out over and above the tweed coat narrative of, when particularly Aussies think about wool, they think of scratchy jumpers at
Yeah.
school. So, and then I think, yes, for me, it was understanding that it's not just a luxury material, but it could actually absolutely benefit the environment.
I love that, Ness. And do you think that this love affair that you have with wool, do you think that helped your transition from, because I would think that the transition from what you were doing into farm life, like that's a massive transition.
It sure is. I mean, I think about this a lot.
Mm.
We, at the time, had an outback station, which was, for our New South Wales listeners, it was about an hour south of Cobar on the Kidman Highway. So, 22,000 of acres of just red dirt and cropping country. I remember being out there in my work boots and thinking, how did this happen? Like literally, I was living in Tokyo and London and, living all over the world, working all over the world. And I just remembered feeling this sense of freedom, this sense of opportunity, and the blue sky and that red dirt is absolutely in my veins. So my great-grandmother, as I just referred to, Sarah Jane Bond, the Bond family were from Dubbo in New South Wales. So at heart, I suspect I'm still a far western New South Wales girl, although, I was born and raised in Sydney Harbour.
Love it, Ness. So tell us a bit about an eco entrepreneur. Like, what does that mean? And you did touch on those beautiful products that you are making. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that as well?
Absolutely. So being an eco entrepreneur really is about building a business that actively contributes to a greater social and environmental landscape. So for me, it's not just about producing beautiful wool, and it's a holistic approach. It's about looking at the regenerative farming practices that we engage in. It's also about then partnering with the right people who also share my passion for ethical and sustainable production. So that's across responsible business pathways, ensuring that we know the names of the people that are making our product. We know that they are appropriately remunerated. I can never say this word. Remunerated. Sorry, remunerated. And we know that they're also meeting the global eco credentials in terms of how yarn production is done, in terms of the environment that the people are working in. So for me, it's a holistic ESG approach. Beyond that, my husband and I are also very passionate about carbon and biodiversity projects. I've actually recently just sold our cattle station, which was the largest land holding on the eastern seaboard of Australia, east of the Great Dividing Range. And while I had embarked initially on a koala project, as part of that sale, we've actually been able to secure the new purchaser is actually, over the course of the next 25 years, going to plant over 3 million trees. So I think when we look at the business, so to answer your question, it's about the beautiful products, but to me, it's a much bigger landscape, because I need to be able to demonstrate to my consumer that we are at every touch point, we are transparent in terms of how we operate. So with regards to the actual product, as I touched on before, I set about creating a handcrafted baby blanket range, which was literally from the kitchen table. And I did so through one of Australia's most severe droughts. And again, it was, as we were saying before, it was about utilising my skills from the bush and my skills from the city, and combining them, and combining my passion, skills and abilities to do something that was purpose driven. So, I'm not one to sit idle. So to understand that there was a need in the market, that no one was able to go out and simply buy a beautiful handcrafted pure merino baby blanket. They didn't exist. So that was an opportunity there. And then as part of a really fabulous social media campaign, Buy from the Bush, my business was featured, and then also on the ABC's Landline. And then the business literally just took off. And so to this day, I have handcrafted baby blankets from Bondi to New York. I have been able to engage women, mostly sitting around the age group between 75 to 90, feeling valued, being able to pass on their expertise and craft. So that has been hugely rewarding. But of course, you cannot scale a business that's handcrafted. So my desire to return to my roots and to pursue fashion enabled me to kick off a new beautiful capsule range. And for me, that was very much anchored in my belief of exquisite craftsmanship, which it was an absolute, a really conscious decision to choose made in Italy. And so we have certainly had some hurdles over the past year, which, has meant that I am slower coming to market than I had anticipated. However, I'm really a believer in these things happen for a reason, and it all comes together when it's meant to come together. So,
yeah.
And it's allowed me to, in the meantime, secure my own sheep property, Emu Creek, which is located in Walker, which is steeped in history. It's 160 years of growing superfine merino wool. It's won all sorts of prestigious global awards for growing some of the best wool in the world. And so now it allows me to really step into that next process of becoming RWS certified as a grower, which means that we are meeting those global credentials so that I can grow wool fit for purpose for our knitwear, and then also engage on carbon and biodiversity projects to offset our emissions, keeping in mind, of course, that, the wool is a fabulous mechanism for storing carbon. And then, of course, once you go through shearing, that carbon's released. So we are truly a vertical brand. I'm truly excited to bring this new range to market because it's very vibey. It's for a sophisticated woman. It's, for women such as yourself. I can't wait to get you in a gorgeous jumper. But we oversee every stage from merino wool production to final garment creation, ensuring that future traceability and sustainability. And, also at the heart of our brand, we've actually lifted a branding icon, which is a chevron, which is actually from our baby blanket range, so that when consumers see that branding icon, they can clock it and say, oh, that's a Vanessa Bell sweater. And that they know that they are then contributing, they're making a conscious decision to choose wool for a better life and planet. They don't need to be as passionate about the environment as I am, but in doing that, in making that decision, they know that they can have that luxury and sustainability in a space that coexists sans the guilt. So it's really exciting.
So exciting, Ness. I can absolutely hear your passion and see that. So it's incredible. So Vanessa, I think it's fair to say that you have, successfully navigated reinvention, and change is a constant in our world. So what advice do you have for leaders facing the fear of change?
Well, I absolutely understand that change is uncomfortable. It can be absolutely terrifying. However, staying still is far worse. And so for me, I've really had to reinvent myself multiple times, moving from fashion to farming, and now then, returning to fashion through my global knitwear brand. But what I've learned is you don't need to have all the answers, and you just need to take that next step. And I really feel that it's vital that you put your hand up for help. And I think it's incredibly important to anchor yourself in your values. So for me, my values are courage, innovation, and integrity. And I live and breathe these values in every aspect of my life. And I can understand, when we were going through our corporate careers, I think, we used to see these presentations that would come up, and you'd see the company culture values, and everyone would go, ugh, really? But I have to say, when you're really clear on your intention and purpose, and you have such clarity over your values, it really does provide an anchor for you. And so
Mm.
I would say when you have that anchor, you are then able to lean into those values, and then you're able to make better decisions. You can
Mm.
make far more conscious decisions. And I always think that in terms of reinvention, don't be afraid to think big. Like, do
Yeah.
not. You can strip it. You can strip it down, as you progress. But I've always had very audacious goals, like huge goals. And I know I've had an incredibly diverse career, from working for the Japanese mafia in Japan to being, working in the Australian wine business to being in media. Everything I've done, I really feel like I've had a plan to get there.
Mm.
You need a
Mm.
plan and you need to enact that plan. So action is such a huge part of reinvention. The other thing I would say is for those facing uncertainty, focus on what you can control.
Yes.
I think if there's anything I've learned in farming, oh my goodness, I've been 2 days out from the harvest of our dreams only to see a tornado rip through our crop. Or, as I said, living through one of the worst droughts on record where we're pulling emus out of dams and cattle and sheep. You can't change the weather, but you can absolutely adapt your approach. So I would say the same really does apply in business.
Mm.
The other thing I'd say is to really surround yourself with good people.
Yeah.
Absolutely vital. And for me, I mean, as I live and work remotely, my team are remote as well. I mean, my production team are in Glasgow and Scotland. My designer is in Italy. My digital marketing manager is in Melbourne, although she's Swiss and will return to Europe and still continue working. But the trust is the key. Trust in your team
Yeah.
and being able to delegate. And the other thing I would say is take action before you feel ready. So there's no perfect moment. There's literally no perfect moment. I wake up every day thinking very clearly what I'm grateful for, what is my intention, what do I need to take action on. So having that sort of priority. And I think, when you touched on this in your book, I mean, I giggled with you when we were talking about where did I sit in You Always Have a Choice. And I said to you, I'm a control freak and FOMO. And I absolutely, one of the toughest things for me is delegating and having that trust in people, not to, I'm not a micromanager by any means, but finding the right people so that you can be clear on your priorities, set boundaries. And just one last tip, I would say focus on your progress and not your mistakes. So for
Yeah.
me, I think I do this every month, and I would never have dreamt of doing this before, but it's part of a new shift in my mindset. I write down the wins. So at the end of every month, I write down the wins, and then at the end of that year, I collate those wins, and then it gives me literally a 30,000 foot glance of what's actually transpired in the past year and how I can celebrate those things, because
Yeah.
nothing in life is easy. You have to work super hard, but if you should also take that time to celebrate.
Absolutely. Very wise advice there, Ness. Now, you touched on my book, You Always Have a Choice. And in that book, the above the line, below the line strategy really hit home for you. And in your words, using your words, letting above the line is the only choice when you live in the bush. There's no time for anything else. So can you share with us how you believe that the above the line, below the line strategy builds resilience?
Absolutely. I think, definitely when you're in the bush or in the country, change is a constant. I mean, change is a constant regardless of being in an urban or country environment. However, things just go up a level, particularly when you're remote. So,
Yeah.
for example, if you get a flat tire and you're on a dirt road and you're 3 hours from anybody and you can't get anyone on the CB radio, or even if you can, you're still changing the tire yourself. Like, you have to have that sense of there's no one coming for you. So again, it goes back to having a plan. It's that old adage of making sure that you have water on board, making sure that you know how to change your tire. So in terms of how, being above the line and how that you really need to, how that builds resilience, yes, it's that understanding that no one is coming for you and that you need to do it yourself.
Yeah.
But I think you have to stay clear-headed. It is what it is. And again, it really comes back to mindset. So when you talk about resilience, that positive mindset transfers into, it's all about the experience. So it can really influence how you experience that situation. Now, you can jump out of the car and you can have a complete tantrum, and that's okay. Like, I've been there. I've done that.
Yeah.
I've literally kicked the tire. I get it. However, it's still not going to change the outcome. It is what it is. You need to give yourself an uppercut and just move on. And I say that with love and jest. I'm not promoting violence here in any capacity. But, in nature, there's a constant force. And I think it's elevated when you see and you live in nature, and you can see how it's all about survival and the elements. And there is constant tension, whether or not it's the winds, blowing at 25 or 30 knots, or animals are calving and there's tension in the air because, you can feel that within the animals, or you can see what's going on in the other night, for example, we had floods that were just unbelievable. We had our river go up by 15 metres. And the night before, hearing this incredible noise of all the frogs literally evacuating. They evacuated to higher ground. So when you're actually in the thick of it and you can hear how nature responds, you can hear that resilience within nature. And I think nature can be such a huge, it's an educator in so many respects if you just have the patience and the time to listen. So I think it's also around acceptance. So, we touched on, I had a tragic event that happened where my assistant was just in a really dreadful accident at the end of last year. And, being in that moment, when you're above the line, you have to act, you have to make decisions. I would say, though, that when you do in the bush, that dropping below the line is a delayed reaction. The grief, the shock, the inability to comprehend what's happened. But then I think understanding resilience for me is totally anchored in acceptance. So when you accept what's going on, it opens the door to possibilities. It opens the door to healing. It opens the door to understanding that rationally, even though, we can surmise different reasons for things happening or not happening, acceptance is absolutely fundamental. Yeah. And I think, in fashion and farming, that's a common truth. So, the conditions are ever changing. You need to focus on the solutions and not the setbacks. But I really feel that true resilience lies in responding with integrity, and finding the ingenuity in moments of necessity, and allowing yourself the grace on the days when the frustration gets the better of you. And I think so many of us shy away from that. I don't think there's any shame in sitting below the line. It's just about how long do you want to sit there.
That is absolutely key. And thank you for sharing, some of your story there as well. It is, because we're never going to be above the line all the time. We're humans, and we're not perfect. We don't aim for perfection. We aim for progress. So I think that, understanding when we are below the line, and if we have been down there for a period of time, we need to switch the mindset and get curious about, okay, so why am I feeling this way? Why am I staying stuck in this? How can I move forward? And therefore, even though you're still feeling whatever you're feeling, you can move above the line and get curious about how to move forward. And that puts you back in control, and you can become conscious and intentional about your actions.
That's right. And I think understanding that it's not specific to a time frame. So I think people think, oh, it's fine, I'm going to knock out how I feel about a certain position or get on top of an emotion in a specific time frame. I think it's really vital that people understand that things can happen to you 25 years ago, and all of a sudden they creep to the surface, and it's what I refer to as the delayed reaction. Like and so that acceptance, as you just articulated, and being able to have a strategy around that enables, when you do have those trigger moments, to also manage them. And I think for me, when I look at nature and it's very much about survival, I think that's inherently part of the human spirit, is to bury those emotions so that we don't have to deal with them. But it's just understanding, having the strategy to be able to deal with them when they pop up.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in understanding all that you have shared and the fact that you're so passionate, there is something that you have to celebrate, which we only found out yesterday prior to recording this, which is that you've been nominated as a woman who is changing the world. In how many categories?
Well, thank you, Julie. I'm very humbled and quite overwhelmed by this. So it's in 5 categories, and also then the People's Choice Award for making a difference as well. So it's a huge honour, and off to London to celebrate with the other finalists. For me, I feel very firmly that it's not from a place of ego. For me, it's vital that I deliver global impact through my position on promoting Australian wool as a solution for fashion.
Yeah.
And, I have such a strong stance against microplastic pollution. So if I can advocate for Australian wool and Australian growers, and the fabulous work that the Australian fashion industry, in particular Seamless and the Australian Fashion Council, are doing in showcasing how we can move to a circular economy, it's just a tremendous opportunity to shine a light on the work that collectively as industries we're doing.
Absolutely. And congratulations. Like, it's phenomenal. And it is in recognition of everything that you are doing and will continue to do. And, as part of the questions I sent you was about your legacy. And is there anything that you'd like to add to that? Because to me, it's really clear the legacy that you're wanting to leave. And I think legacy is such a powerful thing for people to think about now. We often think about it, when people are on their deathbed, and it's like, make sure you don't have any regrets, and, people espouse this. But it's really understanding that we create our legacy through everything we do now and what we have done. So if you could summarize the legacy that you would like to leave behind, what would that be?
Well, firstly, thank you, Julie. For me, it's really about my true intention is to deliver global impact through my farming, fashion and biodiversity projects, to be able to really inspire people, as I touched on before, to choose wool for their own personal health and the health of the planet. And, to walk away thinking that, in the case of Kupla Karapa, my recently sold cattle station with my husband, is that legacy will enable literally millions of trees to be grown, for old growth forests to be kept to, and I mean, in between that landscape, it runs from sort of sea level right through to 1,000 meters. So different microclimates to enable the protection of that flora and fauna. That's the sort of legacy that I'm interested in delivering, and being able to, it's not about me. It's never been about me. It's about making sure that what we do now, it's measurable. Because you can talk about these things, but unless you're actually taking action and providing, protection for habitats such as the koalas, which I know frequent now our backcountry I mean, after the huge fires, we were talking literally thousands of koala populations were decimated. To know that the old growth forests and our rivers remain pristine, this is hugely important. And when I go for a walk in the afternoon and I see our platypus swimming in the river, or when I look at the carbon projects we've been involved in, or biodiversity, that's hugely important. But likewise with my fashion, as I touched on before, creating beautiful fashion that actually can be a mechanism for creating a movement to consider how we approach fashion. And it's, I mean, when you literally look at the amount of synthetics that are going into landfill, we really need to be looking at other solutions around things like taxing synthetics and really rewarding natural fibers such as merino and cotton. So it's a long-winded way of saying, in terms of legacy, it's a collective vision for what I see as being leaving the world in a better place than when I found it.
Love that. I love that, Nats. And I love everything that you're doing, and congratulations to you on what you have achieved and will continue to do. And thank you for being part of Leading You.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure, Julie. Thank you so much for having me on Leading You. I'm a huge fan and looking forward to catching up very soon.
Absolutely.